Since the dawn of philosophy, thinkers have argued about whether or not we have innate ideas, whether we are born knowing things as Plato believed, or rather as John Locke and other empiricists argued, the mind is a blank slate on which experience writes. An American linguist, Noam Chomsky, gave a twist to this debate in the 1960s by demonstrating that children learning to speak just don't have enough information to form the complex grammatical maneuvers that allow them to generate unlimited new and original sentences. Yet they do so with ease. There's a poverty of stimulus. Something else must be going on. Chomsky's hypothesis was that there are inborn structures in our brain, what he called a language acquisition device, or LAD, which gives us a natural propensity to organize the spoken language that we hear in various grammatical ways. Without that, we couldn't get started as language learners. If he's right, language structure is hardwired as a kind of universal grammar. Our slates have been written on before we emerged from the womb.
Noam Chomsky. Who is Chomsky? Noam Chomsky is a contemporary psychologist, linguist, and political activist, known both for his theory of innate grammar and for his political activism. In this video, I'm going to talk about his 6 main principles of transformational generative grammar. First of all, transformational generative grammar founded by Noam Chomsky in the late 1950s. The transformational generative grammar is interested in possible sentences such as the speaker's or the hearer's knowledge of the language competence rather than his actual use of it performance. Also, it argues that grammatically correct sentences are generated through subconscious rules, which means grammatically correct sentences are not based on imitating. What are the main principles of Chomsky's school? One of his main principles is language as a productive mechanism. Language as a productive mechanism means from limited number of words we can produce unlimited sentence. Chomsky's view about first language acquisition of children. Chomsky criticizes the belief that children learn language by imitations of adults around them. He says if children are imitating adults around them, then why they have their language mistakes? They should produce language perfectly as adult. So, language not taught by imitation and repetition. Chomsky rejected the behaviorist theory of language and its concept of stimulus and response. According to behaviorists, the quality and quantity of language the child hears, as well as the reinforcement offered by others in the environment, will shape the child's language behavior. This theory gives a great importance to the environment as a source of everything the child needs to learn. Because Bloomfield had accepted the principle of behaviorism and recommended that, from the basis of language study, behaviorism was widely accepted in America. On the other hand, Chomsky says reinforcement and environment are not important for the child to acquire language. He says the mind has a role in learning language. Also, he argued the behaviorism theory and he says he has his scientific theory. Chomsky proves his belief in creativity, which means people can understand a new sentence as well as they can create their new sentence, and this creativity distinguishes them from machine. Fifth principle is transformational grammarian uses speaker intuition as his data, and this intuition is belong only to native speakers, which means unconsciously we produce our sentence. Also, he divided intuitions into 3 types. First one, the grammatical categorizations, then the grammatical intuitions, finally the intuitions of semantics. The last principle is the transformational grammar makes a claim for universality, which means all the languages have the concept of noun or phrase. Noun definition is the same in every language. The concept of noun is universal. Also, the concept of a phrase is universal. Finally, noun and phrase are defined independently. In short, transformational gave a credit to the mind, unlike the behaviorist gave the credit to the environment.
The question then is, well, what kind of a system is it? On the surface, languages look very different from one another. So if somebody walks into the room and starts speaking Swahili, I'm not going to understand a word, though I will recognize that it's a language. I won't understand it, but I know it's not noise. As soon as you look more deeply, you find that these languages are basically molded to a pretty similar design, maybe an identical design. The large parts of the language, what we hear is just the sounds. But that's a very superficial part of language. The core of language is principles that determine actually an infinite array of possible expressions, structured expressions, which have definite meanings. Now, all of that is well beyond what we can just observe by, say, looking at the texts. And when a child is learning a language, the child doesn't learn those things. There's no evidence for them, almost no evidence for them. Nobody can teach them. We don't know what they are. These are just part of our nature. The core principles, so-called syntactic principles, that form expressions and that provide specific interpretations for them, that's apparently just all part of our nature.
In conclusion, in this video I talk about Chomsky's principles, Chomsky's view about language system, and competence versus performance. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you like it.